Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Thursday, January 5th, 2023 Roanoke County School Board meeting and reorganization meeting, along with our work session. Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll, please.
Mr. Greenway.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tony.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Lynn.
Yes, ma'am. All right, item number 2, reorganization of the board, election of chair, vice chair, clerk, and the deputy clerk. Dr. Nicely.
All right, at this time, we'll ask for nominations for chair for the 2023 year.
Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, I'd like to nominate Brent Hudson for the chair for 2000, well, I guess it's mid-year, but for calendar year 2023.
I probably got us tongue-tied on that.
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations? If not, we'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mr. Greenway.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tony.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lynn.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess I'll go ahead and ask for nominations for vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go ahead and nominate Tim Greenway for vice chair for this calendar year.
I'll second that.
Any other nominations? All right, if not, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Greenway.
I'll abstain.
Mr. Tony.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lynn.
Yes, ma'am.
And then at this time, Mr. Chair, I guess, whichever I'm speaking to at this point, I would like to make the recommendation that you name Angela Roberson as clerk and Edie York as deputy clerk.
Make your motion to accept that.
And I'll second that.
I just made the recommendation. They're running the show now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ask for the roll.
So we do accept that recommendation.
Mr. Greenway.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tony.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Lynn.
Yes, ma'am. Closed session? Well, it's your show at this point.
Calendar.
Mr. Hudson?
All right, 2.02, establish meeting dates, places, and times. Do we have a motion to accept the times that have been presented?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we move to closed session.
No, this is setting meeting
Calendar.
dates, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So I move that we accept the dates as listed.
Madam Clerk?
We need a
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Mr. Linden.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tony.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Greenway.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am. All right, closed session. Mr. Linden, would you read us into closed session, please?
Certainly. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Roanoke County School Board convene in closed session for the following: to discuss the investigation of a student matter pursuant to the scholastic record exemption at 2.2-3711A2 of the Code of Virginia, and to discuss the acquisition of real property for a public purpose where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the school board pursuant to the real property exemption at 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Linden.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Tony.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray.
Yes.
Mr. Greenway.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes, ma'am.
Get used to this. I know.
Did you have one?
That's true.
All right.
Gone a long time ago.
Mr. Linden, would you like to bring us out of closed session, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Roanoke County School Board come out of closed session for the following: to discuss the investigation of a student matter pursuant to the scholastic record exemption at 2.2-3711A2 of the Code of Virginia, and to discuss the acquisition of real property for a public purpose where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the school board pursuant to the real property exemption at 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia. And I also move to certify that, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the school board.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Linden?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chung?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. So there are no action items from closed, so we'll go to 4.01, COVID-19 funding spending plan approval request. Ms. Susan Peterson.
Good afternoon, thank you. I am here today. Back in December, at the work session, I gave you the heads up that we had to reopen our spending plan for stakeholder input and create a new plan and post it on our website. So I am here today to provide you the results of what we've been through. And what you're going to see is going to look very similar to what I presented in December. So just bear with me as we walk through this. Just as a reminder, we did receive 25 grants from the federal government in response to the pandemic. The one with the spending plan that is affected is the ESER 3. This donut chart shows the 3 acts, and then all of the grants that came from the 3 acts surround around the outside of the chart. So we started out having multiple stakeholder meetings. We met with a variety of different groups of employees, and you can see on the list, I won't bore you by reading them all, but there's the list of them. I would like to go ahead and send my appreciation to Ms. Rochereau for letting me join the SAC meeting. First off, that is such a well-run organization, and it was really exciting to watch those students and how they interact. I was really impressed with some of the comments that they came back. They had very relevant things to say, and I've got a list of some of them up here. Granted, this is only some of the more prevalent items and relevant to the grant that they said, but I walked away with a whole page of items that they made recommendations on. I also met with the principals, and the information that I provided in December I had went ahead and shifted some funds around to extend the 10 elementary school principal or elementary school teacher contracts. Those temporary teachers only are for this year. And it was my understanding that there was a desire to extend them. However, when we met with the principals, we realized that they would be in a better position if we extended the subcontract instead of just those teachers. Because the subcontract, it's one permanent sub at every school, and they're able to use them if they have an absence, or if they don't have an absence, they're able to let that permanent sub provide remediation to students. And so it's a little more flexible than the teachers, and that helps every school as opposed to just the elementaries. And both groups of principals were wanting us to move forward with the subs. The other
Excuse me. When do the contracts go out?
contracts go out in April-ish.
April? Okay.
Yeah, that's-
It's weird. I mean, I'm glad, some school divisions are already getting them out there. believe
Yeah,
it
I
or
don't,
not.
I think we send the letters of intent, and unfortunately, no one from HR is in here at the time. But I think letters of intent typically go out either this month or next month.
Yeah.
And then our contracts will
And then
go
the
out
contracts.
after that. The other thing that the principal was mentioned was in the middle school, those reading specialists were very useful and very helpful, given the timing of when the learning loss happened and getting the students back into reading better. We also had comments from various other groups, common themes, school counselors, mental health, pay, throughout all the meetings. The other thing we did was we put a survey out there, and we sent this survey out to all employees. We sent it to the RCCPO organization, the SEAC, a variety of different organizations to try and garner additional input. We did have 54 respondents. Most of them were families, staff, students, and teachers. This survey really had two questions. Do you agree with our spending plan? And 65% said yes, they agree with it. So I think that speaks volumes to what the school board and the school division has done so far with the federal funding. And then the other was comments of what could we do? Where would you like to see this money shifted to? Again, common themes: money, bonuses, raises, mental health, your counselor support, and tutoring.
Excuse me. I was going to say, 54 respondents, is that really enough to, the same thing? Yeah.
How many people did it go out to?
Pardon?
How many did it go out to?
I
54?
emailed it to 2,000 employees, and then we had folks send it to the SEAC group and the RCCPO group. To
I
send
thought you
to
said
the-
families also. No?
Pardon?
Not families?
The RCCPO was responsible for forwarding it to the families.
And
So
we
then-
have 54 responses. So I guess all I'm saying is there's
20%.
just not much representation. Right.
It wasn't, but I'm glad that the ones that did respond, we are,
You know, how
the ones
much-
that are tuned in are supporting what we've done so far.
Yeah.
The others complaints, just.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, we also had a public hearing at the December 15th work session, or school board meeting, and no one showed up for that either.
Right.
And that was advertised in the Roanoke Times twice, so, I mean, we do our best to get the information
Oh,
out.
no, I'm not knocking that you didn't do that. I'm just saying, you know, how much stock can we put in? And again, we're happy that 54 responded, but
Only a
how
fifth
much of a
them.
representation is that?
It's
I
a
will
low
say-
number. I mean, the bottom line is, you know, we're trying to make sure we're shifting every resource that we can into the unfinished learning pot. And I think we're all pretty much in agreement that's what we want to do. So I think we feel good about the outcome regardless. It is a low number though, you're right.
Yeah.
And I would say if there are people that really thought we weren't spending it properly, we'd have heard from more than 54.
That's a good point, yeah.
That's the positive spirit.
Yeah, half full.
So the next 4 slides are really the details of just the ARPA ESA 3 formula grant. And these are the line items that are included in the spending plan itself. One of the largest differences you're going to see from what you received in December and this one, we left everything as of November 15th so that the dollars wouldn't change because of activity. But what did change is we updated the budget to eliminate any personnel lapse. We reran what the current year needs are and what next year's needs are for positions that go over 2 years. And then we looked at other line items for have we finished that particular project or whatever. And we've kind of cleaned that up a little bit. So the first one is our prevention and remediation strategies. The second one is unfinished learning. This one changed drastically from December because the federal government did issue new guidance as to what qualifies for unfinished learning. So the last 3 items, rows on here, the premium pay for employees of 1.5 million, the hard to fill sped stipend, the 690,000 and the 587,000, now qualifies as being considered unfinished learning, where under the prior guidance, it did not necessarily qualify in this category. So that's one reason why this went up. But we also did shift funds in here to extend the middle school reading specialists out to 2024. And we did just update all the payroll to remove the lapse. So now, the ARPA requirement is 20% of this entire grant should be put towards unfinished learning, In December, we had 27%, and now we're up to 54%. This next group are other uses. This is going to be down drastically because those 3 items were moved to unfinished learning. But you'll also see the daily sub went up, where we are extending that for an additional year. And you'll see in a bit, that's going to affect a bunch of other grants as well. So then the last slide only really got trued up for the payroll true up. So that's your academic and your social and emotional learning.
Susan, I'm trying to catch these. I'm going back just to understand a little bit, but on the ESSER 3, what is the 450,000? Ventilation FLE, what is FLE?
I'm
Fort
sorry.
Lewis Elementary.
Number 5,
Fort Lewis Elementary School.
Fort Lewis, oh, okay,
Oh, yes.
all right.
Sorry, you're for,
I'm just trying to make sure I understand these. And then, okay.
And
Hard to fill, special ed stipends, so we've got 587 for that. Okay.
And we're going to add 5 additional reading specialists in middle school.
We're extended it another year. We already have those for this year.
Okay.
And the middle school principal says a game changer, you know, having those. So we certainly want to be able to continue them even beyond the grant, but we can actually include them one more year in the grant from what Susan shifted around.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, so on the ESSER 3 other uses, so we're gonna, is this 5 additional floating nurses over what we already have?
No,
that's
the ones
already
we
been
have.
spent. No, the nurses will be done by the end of this year. We had 5 nurses in 2022, 3 in 2023, and they won't continue beyond this year.
God, I was just curious if that was, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
But yes, they were over and above for floating. in
At
case
that
there was
time,
so
yeah,
much.
back when, whatever that number was, I got you.
Where were your
Okay.
contact tracing?
what, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
what are the dates, and remind again about the ESSER 3 funds?
When they have to be spent by?
Yes, ma'am.
So ESSER 3 has to be spent by September of '24. So that'll get us through school year '24 plus 3 months of school year '25.
Okay.
And then ESSER 2 and CIRSA, it's 1 year earlier. So it'll be next September.
This September.
This September.
This September, yes, the next. 1 year
23.
we'll see. Yes.
Right, 23. It's 2. Okay.
Okay.
And then the CARES 1, that's already gone.
Yep.
It was last September.
In fact, your bar graph on the next slide kind of shows where it's kind of remaining.
Yeah, this is what's remaining in the ESSER 3. And so I thought this was a really good visual. The first group of columns represent what was in the spending plan to begin with when we posted it August of 2021. The middle one represents those 4 categories, groupings of spending, in the current final budget as I am presenting it to you. And then the final column shows what's left in that grant. So I can tell you we know how to spend money because we've spent a lot of it. But what I think is really good to understand and see is really the red bar, and I did make it red so that your eye would go to it. That is our unfinished learning. And you can see where we went from, 2.5 million up to now over 5.3 million towards the unfinished learning. So this chart, I think, shows as a school division, our school board has taken it seriously to meet the governor's challenge and put as much towards the unfinished learning as the governor pushed out there. Now, the ESSER 3 grant was not the only one that changed in this shifting. I know one of y'all have said it's just like a shell game where we're shifting money left and right, and we kind of do that and figure out how can we best utilize the money to get the most out of it. In order to fund that daily substitute, we had to move money around in the ESSER 2 formula grant, the ESSER 2 unfinished learning grant, which we used for summer school, and the ESSER 3 unfinished learning grant. So all of those have an impact from that to ensure that we could have that substitute for the second year. One thing that I think is important for you to understand, and the instructional teams are working with this at this time, in moving the funds out of the summer school grant in ESER 2, we have summer school money in ESER 3 as an add-on grant for just under $600,000. However, there is a little caveat where we have been running summer school at about 70 hours, 75 hours for a student. The ARPA requires us to offer at least 128 hours for the student. So it really extends the requirement for the ARPA money is more going towards like an 8-week summer school, where we've not done an 8-week summer school, which is kind of long. So our instructional team is looking into how we can meet that and not kill our staff and our students at the same time, because that's a long time when we have a short summer.
Well, the good news is we're required to offer that number of days, but we're still able to give parents and students flexibility in terms of doing what, still take their vacations and so forth. In other words, we have to offer the 128, but they don't have to, come the entire 128 in order to participate. So we're not closing doors and raising barriers. That was part of our concern was, a lot of families just wouldn't be able to do that. But we'll have the flexibility to still, work with families and kids' schedules.
So really, at this point, we have two things left to do. I would ask today that you approve kind of how we've shifted the funds and what I've shown you for the ESER 3, so that I can build out that spending plan. And then I'll go back and I'll write the spending plan based on this information and get it posted to our website by our extended deadline of January 15th. It was originally supposed to be on there by December 31st, but VDOE offered an extension, and as you know, I took a last-minute request to get that in.
Do you have anything
Motion
else?
to accept?
Your second?
Second.
Madam
Does that
Clerk?
require an action item at a work session?
It does. So what we did in this situation
It was
is,
approval.
well, so what we did is it's supposed to be on action for December meeting, because we, presented this in December work session. It was supposed to be on action for December meeting, but, there was a last-minute request to kind of postpone that. We got the extension, and so we actually advertised this as an action item, which we don't typically do at a work session, but we advertise it that way, and, I gave you guys a heads up that we'd be asking for that today.
All right. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Linden?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Buchanan?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ray?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Greenway?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Item 5.01, Policy Review, Dr. Rhonda Stegall.
Good evening.
I move.
I have Charlene Vale here with me today, since we're talking about a medical policy today, so she can help answer any questions we might have. So we'll take a look at the first policy, 8.01.04. That one has actually been deleted, so that will be an easy one to review. The reason we deleted this one is we took all the information that's in this policy and put it in the next one we're going to take a look at. So the next one we're going to look at is 6.42 DAR. This one, I'll just walk through the changes here. What we did is we cleaned this policy up. We took the one we just deleted and put it into here, and then cleaned up this language a little bit. You just recently saw this policy. It came before you not long ago when we had some minor changes to this. So this one is about the use of mobile devices, and we separated it to designate staff and students, because in the original policy that was jumbled together, so now we've separated that. So you will see that the staff section has been separated out. All right, and then the next page, if you look at number 4 through 6, what happened here is this was rearranged from the current policy. So this was already in this policy. We just rearranged it to put it here, and none of that information has changed. That was all the same. And then the next section, you see students, B. And then if you look at number 2, 2 and 3 came from the deleted policy, and we did make some changes in 2 and 3. So in number 2, it states that elementary, middle school students may possess a personal mobile device on school property, provided that the device must be turned off or in airplane mode and kept out of sight at all times. That means throughout the entire school day. Students enrolled in a middle school photography class may use the camera feature on the mobile phone during photography class with permission of the teacher. And then number 3, we made a few changes there for the high school students. May possess a personal mobile device on school property, provided that the device must be off or in airplane mode and kept out of sight during class. So the rest of that information, personal mobile devices can only be used for learning activities with the explicit permission of the teacher. All other use is prohibited during class time. And then the rest of that is all the same, nothing changed in that second section. High school students can still use their phone during lunches between classes and at the end and the beginning of the school day. And then number 5 is an addition. This was an addition statement, and we were asked last time to run this by attorney. This has been reviewed. Students may not use any device to photograph, video record, or audio record any verbal or physical altercations between students on school grounds or during school activities, or to record any school staff member addressing specific disciplinary situation involving students on school grounds or during school activities. So, and then the 6th, 7th, and 8th, that came from the deleted policy as well as number 4. And then there were no changes there. And if you go to number 9, this was just revised language. Nothing major change here except for just some terminology. The school division reserves the right to inspect personal mobile devices of their content if reasonable suspicion exists that school division policies or local or state or federal laws have been violated. The scope of the search must be reasonably related to the objectives of the search and not excessively intrusive in light of the age and sex of the student and the nature of the suspected infraction. That was originally in there. We just had a little bit of change in that language. The next document, this always lived outside of this policy, but we felt it needed to attach to this policy. This was always what was sent for parent forms that they have to sign off at the beginning of the school year, but it was not included in policy. So we wanted to put it in here. So that's what C, we have added this whole section. And the only change to this document, if you look at number 2, it says RCPS reserves the right to institute any appropriate civil or criminal action under the law for the failure to return RCPS-issued laptop upon withdrawal from school, including referring the matter to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. So we needed to put that statement in there to proceed with legal action to get our laptops returned or paid for. And so that's the only changes to that policy. Any questions on that one?
This is in essence what we brought to you in December. You all had asked, first of all, make sure it passes legal muster on some of those points. That's been done. And we did that piece about the one piece about the middle school, the photography teacher asked specifically, could we please make an exception for that class?
Do we feel like this has enough meat to back the teachers if it comes to a disciplinary issue where kids are violating the policy?
I think so.
Okay.
I think the key to this is going to be, frankly, I think they're going to appreciate the stance that the board would take in changing this, because I think that, it does clarify it. It gives us an opportunity to promote it, to make sure we advertise it, to make sure they understand, to make sure that they understand exactly what the expectations are. I think it'll do the thing. And the other thing that we were going to do, remember the thing about the unplugged days, okay, in March? Remember we had suggested that, the school board maybe adopt like a resolution, recognizing that and encouraging that. So Mr. Lineberg's been working on that, and we'll bring that for the regular school board meeting next time for you to adopt or consider.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Were there any other classes, media classes, that they might need to use the phone to record anything? Whether
middle
it be
school?
communication?
No, we asked the
Photography was the
principals if
only?
they had thought of any, and the photography stood out, two principals said that that would be a concern in their schools, so we took that in consideration.
It says it reserves the right, so with explicit instruction, so we're covered.
Yeah, I think the key to that with the high school is for them to, for the teachers and everybody to understand, you know, the default is they're not out. Right? I mean, so that needs to be the change, you know, versus the default being
Put it
kinda laying
away.
around. And it distracts all of us, right? When,
Yeah.
you know, when your phone's going off, so, yeah.
And mobile devices do refer to watches as well, so same type of distraction. So if they're, playing on their watch, it would be the same thing as playing on their phone.
You know, at the end of the day, it's all going to be about implementation.
That's right.
Which teacher wants to take it to what level? We've given them the guidelines, so they have the ability to do it now without any repercussions. A child saying, you broke my phone because you touched it, you took it, things like that. So I think this is a great policy. Thank you for working on it.
Sure. All right.
Nice.
Anything else? All right, the next one is 7.35, administration of naloxone. And so this one, we already had this policy in place and we made a few changes. You'll see there, we had this discussion about maybe introducing this at the middle school with the nurses and giving them the ability to use what we call Narcan, is the abbreviated word, and in case there is an emergency with some sort of opioid overdose. And so we have it at the high school, our nurses and athletic directors and one administrator's trained. So we were going to expand that to the middle school, but after some conversation, we decided why not expand it to all schools. So the Narcan is now free for us through the health department, and we're not sure if it will continue to be free, but it is currently, which is a good thing. So we have decided to extend this to all of our schools, and then we would provide training for everyone. It would include the school nurse, the athletic director, if there is one assigned, and at least one school administrator will be trained. We're actually going to ask that all school administrators get trained on this first go-around, so they all have that basic training down. And so the rest of that language there at the bottom is the Code of Virginia. We just put that language in there in support of our staff providing Narcan in school setting.
Mike?
What is the shelf life?
About a year and a half. Depends on what they ship us, but about a year and a half.
Year and a half? And we're getting it free for how long?
Well, right now, they've set up a thing with the health department, pharmacy in Richmond, so that I can order albuterol and EpiPens and other things from them as well. But the Narcan is free right now. I don't know if they will ever charge us because it's state funded, so I can't, it's not like they have something that says it's going to be stopped at any point. But
How
right
much
now,
is one individual?
well, the company I was buying it from is the company that makes the Narcan. They were charging us $75, but they've reduced their price to $42 a box, which is 2 doses. So I guess if I had to buy it, that would probably be about what it would be.
And how many will we have at each?
We have 1 box with 2 doses at each
Just
of the
one
high
at
schools, and
each
that's what
school.
I would assume we would do at all the
Then it'd be replaced if you had to
Be
use it.
replaced if you used it, then it,
Yes.
And to date, we've not had to use it, but it's always nice. You never know.
yeah. Yeah, good idea.
I think it's a big deal. I mean, we could really save somebody's life. I think it's a good decision to go all the way down to the elementary level, because you just don't know who's going to be exposed. I mean, we know these exposures are happening across the country,
Yep.
and hopefully we'll never be faced with that, but if we do, and we have a higher probability of saving someone's life. So I know, Cheryl, you did a lot of work on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you've done with that.
You know, I just, if you don't mind, I'll make a comment. In talking with Nancy Hands and the Prevention Council, it kind of came to light about this Revive programming. So I just want to thank her and you both for getting together and finding out a solution, because it is saving us a bit of money. It's money that would be well spent. It is nice to have our staff trained. I think this is an excellent idea to have staff at each school trained on this. It actually, it's quite an impressive training that they have, and it wakens you to the risks that are out there with the opioid crisis and fentanyl and the exposures that are happening. And it's just not overdosing, it's poisoning is what's happening in our schools and all over the country. So I'm very happy that you guys took it and went above and beyond. I wasn't thinking about elementary. I'm glad that you did, so thank you for going down that level.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, this policy comes with an accompanying regulation that actually spells out the training and so forth, so there's nothing that can fall through the cracks, and then they do a great job making sure that the appropriate people are trained.
We have that as the next one. We're not going to read it to you, but if you want to put it up there.
That's all right.
That's all right. This is the AR. The only section I want to watch is the training, just the training that we just talked about. We are doing the Revive training, and we are going to, in order to do the Revive training, the understanding is you would be able to provide CPR if necessary. So it just makes sense that all individuals trained in this would need to be trained in CPR. So we're also going to ask that same staff, the administrators, the athletic directors, and of course the nurses are already trained, to be trained in CPR, and then every 2 years. And so that would come with a cost of $1,000 a year whenever we have to do the training. And then we also need to spend $1,000 for storage cabinets for the Narcan, so where everybody can get to it who needs it. And so there will be a $2,000 cost. We can absorb that in my account or in Charlene's, so that's not, we wouldn't need any extra money for that. But we just want, that is an important component because currently our administrators do not have to maintain CPR, which I think it's a great thing that we have more people who are certified in CPR. So, but it will be another ask of them, right? It will be another training session that they'll have to do every 2 years.
We all have to renew our CPR when we recertify for like our teaching license, so, but it's just not that, I mean, it's, every 7 years, now 10 years, right?
10 years.
So this is be a lot more often, do it every 2 years, which can be current.
Does that also include the AED training?
Yes.
CPR, yeah.
Okay.
Which is important because they are trained on that too, but it's not regular training. So I think this will help us get in line with all of that. And we're going to use HR, and they're going to do the every 2 year review. We're going to keep track of it. So it really does pull it all together.
Would the location of the Narcan be close to where the AED and everything else that you would need, or what's your thoughts?
Each high school decided where they wanted to keep it. It's in a cabinet that's not locked, so it's easily accessible, but away from where it could easily be stolen.
Okay.
Most of the AEDs are in the hallway. These are not in the hallways. They're more accessible to teachers and the administration.
You never want to have to use it, any of those things.
No.
But you have to be prepared,
That's right.
right? And Rhonda, I know I mentioned to you on the phone, our students have to be CPR trained,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to have some staff that's CPR trained as well.
That's right. Right. All right. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Stegall. We move on to 5.02, 2023.
Sorry. I saw the other item on here as far as graduation ceremonies. We weren't going to discuss that today?
No, not.
No.
No, that was just, we had some information for your information, but it wasn't part of the agenda for today.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, we'll just plan to put both those items for consent for the next regular meeting.
Yes, sir. 5.02, 2023-2024 budget work session number 1, Ms. Susan Peters.
Good catch.
Welcome again.
Thank you. All right, well, here we go. Good to be here and start our first work session. On the agenda, we are going to keep it kind of simple today. We're just getting our feet wet. We're just getting into the process. So we're going to talk about the budget process a little bit, go over the governor's budget at a very high level. We'll take a look at the replacement plans, do some long-term planning, and then take a look at our final remaining timeline. So our budget process overview is first. And I do like to think of our budget as a puzzle, and it's kind of a good time of the year to start puzzles. Well, maybe not today because it's a little warm, but in the wintertime, you like to break out your puzzle and put together a pretty picture of a hedge dog or a cute puppy dog or something. Well, our puzzle that we're putting together with your input and your guidance is really the educational program of the school division. And we do, just like a puzzle, we have different pieces that are going to fit together, and we have to figure out how to make them work without cutting any of the corners off. Our budget is the primary means of how we manage our expenditures, how we say what we're going to purchase or how much we're going to pay someone, right? We are actually required by law to have our budget as well. Virginia code requires that we present our budget to the County of Roanoke, and they require the County of Roanoke to adopt an ordinance of our budget. So by law, we cannot overspend our budget, and by law, we cannot spend more money than we receive. So that's a fun little fact about our budget. Our budget process is ongoing. As you know, I'm in front of you a lot, and we're talking about budget a lot. Previously, I've shared our budget process with you in more of a circular graphic. Up here, I have it more on a timeline graphic. We have 5 steps that we typically move through during the budget process, and it is really nothing for us to be in 2 different budget years at one time. During audit season, we can be in 3 years at one time. The first step really is in October when we start with the calendar. We present that to y'all in the around October timeframe, and y'all did adopt the calendar. It typically follows what your budget work sessions will be so that we can kind of keep it simple and keep it contained. I don't want to talk to you too much because you don't want to hear from me too much. Then our next step is the budget preparation. It's going to be a bunch of these meetings. It's going to include a public hearing. We have that added to the agenda. We provide communications to the staff through budget blogs and through emails so that everybody who wants to be informed can either go back and watch the work sessions or read the budget blog and see the presentations as we publish them on the website. So that really takes place, starting around November-ish up through March. Then the adoption is step 3. That is in March when you adopt our budget. And then it happens in April, we'll present our budget to the Board of Supervisors. And by May 15th, they will have to adopt the budget and issue the ordinance. Implementation is the 4th step, and that starts July 1st. We typically get ready for it before July 1st because the last thing we want to do is start a new fiscal year and not have money in the accounting system for people to buy their materials and their goods. And I will have to give a shout out to Mr. Terry, as he is the first department to spend probably 90% of his budget right off the bat in July 1. And Ms. York is the one who ends up keying all that in. So I usually see her here July 1st keying all of these invoices. So that's the implementation, and it's the departments knowing what they're going to buy and spend and going through their process of supporting getting the materials to our students in our classrooms. We do provide monthly reports to the school board during the implementation, and even moving into, that's kind of part of the evaluation as well. You get those big, long reports to kind of see where we are and where we've been. So step 5 is our evaluation. We provide those monthly reports, but then most importantly, at the end of the year is our annual audit, when we bring the auditors in and they opine in the annual comprehensive financial report, which is what that ACFR acronym means. It's our big book of financials showing how did we do this past year. And then we end up with our year-end carryover, and we present that to you and how we're going to spend it in the following year, and we get approval and adoption from the Board of Supervisors. So really, by that point, we're already starting in the next school year and the next budget year. So that's our overall budget process. And then a way to think about more of the specifics that go into the budget itself, really your procedure is taking the money coming in and balancing it with the money that's going out. So that's why I like this. I've used the sliding scale a lot because it really is a balancing act. We're putting all these different puzzle pieces together. On the money coming in, we look at the state revenues. We get the calculator tool telling us what our revenues are going to be. multiple times throughout the budget process. It starts with the governor's budget. Then when General Assembly crosses over, we'll get the state and House budget. And then at the end, we'll get the final General Assembly budget, which will be our money for the next year, right? So the state issue breaks those funds up into different categories. We have a standards of quality category, we have categorical category, and we also have a lottery category. So these are just the different pots of how it comes to us from the state. We also, so the state is our largest share of the funds, and then our second largest is the county. And our money from the county is based on the revenue sharing formula. And then the final amount of money coming in that we take a look at and we have to budget and estimate is other funds. So this could be our federal funds, it could be Medicaid funds, it can be grants, it could be fees that we charge, or other costs that, or other monies that come in. So we have to take all of this money coming in and fit it into the puzzle so that it can best support what we want to do to spend the money, right? The largest portion of our money goes out for compensation and benefits. And that doesn't include just how much are we going to pay you next year, but it also includes staffing. How many teachers are we going to put in the school? Is it time to take a teacher away, or is it time to add another teacher in because our numbers and class sizes are changing? So we've got to look at that. That's a big part of what Mr. Bradshaw does in staffing, is making sure we have the right number of people in our schools. And the calculator tool actually tells us if you're in K through 3, you should have a certain number of teachers in a classroom per student. So we have to look at all of that. And then it also includes the wages, the salary scale. What kind of increase are we going to give them? Our benefits, right? Not only is it the VRS benefits, which luckily we're in the second year of the biennium, and they're not going to change this year. The rates are going to stay the same. So we have to look at that. We also have to look at health insurance benefits. That's a big cost for the school division. We'll look at dental benefits. Well, even this year during the compensation study, we're doing a whole study to look at all of our employees and make sure everyone's being properly paid. We haven't done this in several years, and it is a good idea to do this periodically just to keep us up to date and get us more competitive with our neighbors. We definitely want to be competitive with our neighbors. As part of this, we're going to be looking at policies surrounding some of our leave, and to see where we can, provide more richer benefits through our, maybe our sick or vacation, our paid time off. We're going to be looking at all of that as the big compensation package. So that's a big part, and that'll be a lot of what we go over at the next work session in February.
Susan. I'm sorry, go ahead. Do we know anything on the health insurance yet? Because I know that was out to bid.
There are interviews going on right now.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer for that right yet.
And we're in conjunction with the county on that?
That is correct.
Okay.
And when is the pay study, compensation study supposed to be, like, the results?
We'll present that at the next work session.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll strategically align that.
Are we at still 84.6%? Is that still about
Yeah.
what we spend in salaries compensation?
Yeah.
When you think about it, and I know that's a lot, and then you got 14% to run the rest of your schools and do everything else that you gotta do, that's a tight budget.
It really is.
And it really takes discipline, so to get it all that we have, that the lights stay on and everything else happens, so.
That's correct.
Just so realize that the bulk of this is going out, which it should, that's what we are, service industry, so.
Right, and so this slide, what you're talking about, is a really good representation. And maybe I should have made my compensation puzzle piece bigger, because that's the biggest part of the pie, right? But we have to look at that. We have to look at our current needs, right? That's going to be what the departments need to run the specific programs they have going on. What the schools are going to need, that'll feed into what the departments need. So we make sure that we get into the classroom what we need to get into each of the classrooms. And then we also, another large chunk that really is prudent financial planning is the long-term portion. And that's going to be taking a look at we have the capital fund plan where we set aside large dollar amounts to help pay for our capital later on, right? We've got debt service payments to pay for buildings that we have constructed in the past. And then we have the replacement plans that we'll go through, and the replacement plans are set up. I'll get into more of this later, but this is another long-term strategy to try and keep money going into our fleet, our technology, our nutrition equipment, so that things don't get so old that they're falling apart and it's too late. We maintain them going up front. We replace the buses before they get too old and fall apart, because the last thing we want is to have 150 buses out there that aren't running. We need to have them all in good working order. Another thing that I think it's always good to remind everyone is, and this is more of an accounting term, is we work on fund accounting in the government. And what funds are, I typically don't use that accounting ease, if you will. I use buckets. We have buckets of money. We have pots of money. We have baskets of money is how I think it's easier for people to think about it. And these are very set up for a specific purpose. And they're all self-balancing. So each of them has their own cash that we move in and out of. We have pooled cash, and so it's kind of more theoretical than real taking dollars and moving them back and forth. But we have all these different categories. We've got our operating funds, our general fund, our fleet replacement fund, our instructional resources fund, and our technology replacement fund. These are ones that really keep us operating and going forward. We have special revenue funds, which include grants. It includes our nutrition fund, and it includes our student activity fund that are managed by our bookkeepers in our schools. We have the capital funds, major, minor, the bond capital. These are all big pots of money set aside to do those big capital projects. And we have our internal service to manage our health insurance, our dental insurance, our workers' compensation claims. And we have fiduciary fund for our other post-employment benefits. That's what the OPEB stands for. So all of these pots of money are set up, and they all keep their balance at end of year, and they carry forward to the next year through an arrangement with the county. The general fund is the only one who, when we carry the money forward, we allocate it to very specific purposes. All the rest keep it for the purposes that fund was set up for. So let's go ahead and take a very high-level look at the governor's budget. I'm not going to get into the minutia, but we'll stay really high level. And as you know, we can't really do anything with the governor's budget until we take a look at what our projected ADM will be. So I always start with our enrollment projections. So this is a history of where our enrollment has been. This graph shows the kind of purplish and yellow show how we come up with a budget number using grade progression analysis and what the VDOE automatically populates in the calculator tool, and they think we're going to have as an ADM. And then the green is the actual budget that we chose for that year. Then the red is what our March 31st ADM came out as. The March 31st ADM is what they fund us on. And so at year end, they will true us up or down based on what that March 31st ADM is versus what their VDOE estimate is, because that's what they cut us checks on their estimate. But we set up our budget based on our estimate of how we're going to spend it. As you can,
Sorry. Why is the VDOE estimate so high this year? Any idea?
so
What do they know that we don't?
That is a good question. And I actually reached out to them because in talking with our neighbors, the neighbors did not see the trends that we saw with their swap. They said that because our fall membership and our March 31st ADM went up so much that it went up. I'm not comfortable with how high that is at all. That went shot way in the opposite direction.
I asked the same question when we're going over this, because it just doesn't make any sense.
No, it
right?
really doesn't.
So I mean, it'd be great if that were the case, but, you know,
Going back to
what
2020
data
numbers.
backs that up in terms of that being a confident estimate, and we really didn't get a good answer. So it's information, but honestly, I think we almost need to disregard it to a certain extent, in terms of what we want to conservatively budget on.
May I ask, who's they?
The VDOE.
The VDOE came up with that number? I mean, is it a committee of people that look at
Well, the
this?
Virginia Department of Education, they have mathematical calculations.
That they throw
feed
into-
into that number. Yeah.
They know something we don't?
Well, that's what we're asking, but we didn't get a
I
good
wonder
answer.
if other areas, their projected ADM is up.
She-
I've reached out,
Reject.
and it was the opposite trend.
So does that make any sense?
It really doesn't.
More people are
for us.
moving to Roanoke and out of the big
Right.
cities.
So, and historically, we have seen a gap between grade progression and the VDOE estimate. So that is not new, but the fact that they jumped so high in that direction is what really surprised me. And I don't think is reliable until we can get another year under our belt, to see if we need to. And a lot of, way in the past, before 2018, they still were projecting higher than what our grade progression was. And so we always stay conservative and use the grade progression, or came up with a number in between to base our budget on. So, and it is just that, it's just a budget of what we want to spend. But we don't want to leave money on the table and budget too low, but the worst is the opposite is even worse, right? We don't want to budget too high and then not have enough money to pay our people.
That's
And we're presently around 13.2, right?
13.4.
13,418 is what
Right.
December 16th enrollment was.
Oh, December 16th?
That's why, as we discussed this, again, kind of discounting that 13.6 from VDOE, if the trend were to continue, 13.4 is not a bad gamble.
Right.
It's reasonable.
Because we were at 13.2, so we've come up, so.
Yeah. With the grade progression analysis, I would like to explain how that works. We get enrollments by school, by grade, every month. And I will take that enrollment, and for the past 5 years, I will take all the students in, say, grade 11 in the current year and divide that by the students that were in grade 10 the prior year. That gives us a survivorship. How many students are coming to class the next year, right? So I do that for every grade except for kindergarten. And in kindergarten, I actually go out to the BLS websites to get live data of births that occurred in Roanoke County. And then we use that to project what we think our kindergarten enrollment will be. In the past, we did it at a very high level. This current year, I actually did it by school and by grade and by level. So I could take a look at that now and use that, because I think there has been a lot of discussion and talks about adding teachers or shutting schools and shifting people. And I thought it would be helpful if we had that ADM projection by school to understand really what we're looking at. At the end of the day, the grade progression came out at 13,287, and when we're facing December 16th numbers of 13,418, I don't know that I see that much of a dip going forward. So when I consulted with Dr. Lyson and we looked at it, we thought that 13.4 would be a conservative, aggressive number to use. So that's what we would
Conservative
recommend.
aggressive. That's a new term, I like that.
Or a happy midpoint.
Yeah, I gotta figure that one out.
I think it is optimistic to say, we expect, our trend the last 2 years has been, our ADM's pushing up, despite what people sometimes say, because, when you look at historical trends, but, I think it is optimistic to think we can hold our own, but yet not look at that VDOE number and push too much past it.
It's all the new jobs we've created, but anyway, so your grade progression's a lot closer. We found this out from about 7 years ago. When I first came on the board, we did that demographic study. Good Lord, I think that may have been a waste of money. I'd like to see historically what they said we'd be at and where we're at, just to see how that, I don't guess, do we still have that?
I do, I
Oh,
can look
yeah.
into that. Let me make a note to get that to you.
I just,
What I found in looking at that demographic study that was done is they gave you a number, and then they gave you a margin of error that would swing
Yeah.
you $1 million one way or the other.
Right.
And so it
And we
was
just
such a wide
See
margin.
why,
You couldn't lose.
You kind of used it more as, well, my number is within
and that
their
was
top
$100,000,
and
wasn't it?
bottom numbers,
Yeah,
and so I think
the
it's.
first year we did it, we had raised the ADM based off what they told us, like, I don't know, 300 kids, 400 kids, from what Penny usually did. And and it came to find out it was about where Penny would have
It
put
was
it
a
with.
margin error.
Yeah, they're still in the margin of error.
So that ADM number is not one that the board formally adopts at this point, but I mean, usually we have discussion, does the logic seem reasonable, or are you comfortable with us moving forward, building a budget
Right.
on that number?
Because we've been pretty conservative. That way we came in and had money that we didn't expect already, or we didn't lose money that we thought we were going to have.
If
which
you
is
don't
what-
hit this number, you have to kind of give it back the next year.
Yeah, I'd rather have more than that, yeah.
I'd rather have a bigger year end,
Yep.
a little bonus there.
Rather have what? I didn't.
You know, when we do our year end and all of a sudden we have extra money,
Yeah,
I'd rather,
That-
I'd rather be
exactly.
conservative and
that's exactly.
and keep
right.
asking Susan how much money is going to be in the calculator.
I'd rather not go to jail.
I know you'd rather not project.
Until you come back and say, we got to go somewhere and find it.
Right.
Yeah, the last thing we ever wanted to do is be so aggressive that mid-year we're coming back and saying, oh my gosh, we've got to stop spending, we've got to stop doing projects, we've got to stop. We never want to be in that position.
Right.
Right.
There are times, and way back in the recession before I was in this position, that I think we had to do that because we were in a recession. But
What is-
luckily, we've not had to do that since I've been here.
What is the actual per pupil now? Amount?
13,418.
How much?
Keep that in
50
mind.
something? 50?
Oh, sorry.
It's
The cost
5,000.
per.
It's right at
Yeah,
that,
something
yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
right at 5,000. I didn't know.
You mean per
We're living
pupil?
at these
Per
cities.
pupil.
Yeah.
Per pupil cost, yeah. I don't know.
Huh?
Remember water?
So if there's general consensus to stick with this number, this is what we use. I will run the grade progression after each month as we move through the budgeting process to see if it helps. It really hasn't in the past. Usually the December has been our highest one. I don't know why that's the case because usually the numbers are not much bigger. It's something to do with the survivorship percentages.
We'll keep an eye on it. I mean, I think, you know,
Yeah,
if
definitely.
anything, I could see us backing off a little
You're
bit,
right.
but I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
go any higher.
No, I agree with that.
That's reasonable.
All right, and so we'll get into some numbers here for a bit. Keeping it high level, I really have just shared the governor's budget by fund to try and keep it simpler. I'm going to turn on my little laser pointer here so that you can see. So this column right here shows what our 2023, our current year budget is based off of. We've got the ADM of 13,183, and over all of the funds, we have $102,583,692, right? And you can see how it's split up. So then these next two columns is what we consider the caboose budget. So we run the calc tool based off of, and this is the VDOE's estimate. So you'll see the ADM that they're estimating we're going to end up with is 13,359. I left that number in there just to see where we would be because it is higher than our budget. And I'm curious to see, you know, with being at 13,418 now, I don't think that's too far off of where we'll be at the end of the year. So when you run that, it does look like, to Cheryl's point, we are going to have a surplus at the end of this year, a revenue surplus of, you know, 1.9 million that we if we left it alone, would end up going towards our capital projects to help us fund things going forward, right? Which I know Mr. Kegels would be very thrilled to have it come his way. Right behind you.
There he is.
So then, looking forward to the 2024 budget, we ran this off the 13.4 ADM. And in total, we're only going to go up by 3.7 million. But then if you look individually by fund, you'll see our general fund looks like it's going to go up by about 8 million, which is a nice, healthy increase. But keep in mind, this is the governor's budget, and more often than not, we end up coming down a little bit off of that. This is not.
Senate budget.
Yes, we tend to come down off of that to a smaller amount once the General Assembly gets a hold of it. But, I mean, that's kind of our top, where we can probably, we're not going to be that high. It will be nice, though. And you can see we've got some decreases in here from the grant fund for a very specific, like preschool grant that isn't in the calc tool, but I'm thinking it'll probably be available next year. And we did get it this year, but that's self-funded. And then this largest 4.3 million in the capital fund, that is where we had the VDOE gave us capital money for 1 year only, and they only did it for 1 year. So, we had the capital grants that we keep talking with the county about. One of them was formula driven, and that's the 4.3 million, and we put it into our major capital fund in Burton Center to help fund that project. But that we will not get that again next year. So overall, it's going to be a 3.7 million based on what the governor's looking at right now. So some of the highlights in here, if you read through everything that comes with it, included in these numbers is a 5% compensation supplement. There's a supplement for the food and hygiene tax that's going to go away. Since that goes into our sales taxes, they supplement that amount coming to us so that we don't lose out, even though it's helping the citizens to take that tax away. Our sales tax is increasing through the calc tool. And they also have a one-time 1% retention bonus in there for SOQ-funded instructional and support positions. We'll see if this stays in. I don't know if it's going to be one of those items that certain folks are going to pull out or leave in. So I'll be curious to see where that goes. That's not in stone. We'll see where it goes by the end of the entire process. Going down, I already talked about the school construction grant entitlement program. They also reduced the early reading intervention program. And looking at that, that was about a $140,000 reduction to us, and we maintain that in the grant fund. And then the VPI slots were reduced slightly. So those were just high level, some of the items covered by the governor's budget.
Can you just remind us real quick about the compensation supplement? That, it's, in other words, money built into the state budget. We only get that if that's what we give. You know what I'm saying? So they don't, if we don't give a 5%, they don't.
You have to give it.
That's right. So just keep that in mind. And they only, of course, fund the SOQ funded positions, which is why we lobby so hard to get rid of that support cap, which, artificially suppresses that in terms of the portion that we've got to fund, to give everybody a 5%. That's kind of complicated, but I think it's important to remind everybody how that works.
Well, you already did it, so I don't need to.
Well, okay.
So thank you.
You probably
I mean,
could say it better than I did. But.
No, you did that
right.
wonderfully. But no, I can't really add anything to what you said. That you said it all exactly how I would have. So then we'll shift gears. So that's a first kind of touch, dipping our toes into the revenues a little bit. But we want to move forward and do some long-term strategic planning right now. So we'll look at our replacement plans. So this, and I will kind of explain how all of these schedules work, because the next several slides, they're all set up the same way. Depending on the plan, you may have 6, you may have 10, you may have 15, you may have 7 years in the plan. And so the very first year, so in this slide, this first column is going to be the budget for next year. And then every column after that is really a planning tool. It's what we look at of what do we think we need to replace and when. Just about all of these have a transfer that is supported by the general fund and has money coming from the state. So in some cases, some other additional funds going in. And so we use this as a planning tool to look at what do we need to get that transfer to next year. And are there any out years that really are jumping up high that it would behoove us to slowly build up that transfer to a higher amount as opposed to suddenly coming down and having, a big $5 million expense and we have no way to pay for it, right? So that's kind of the whole point of all of these. So at the very beginning, you're going to have our funding sources, and then that second section down will be our replacement needs. So that'll be very specific to whichever plan we're looking at. And then the bottom will be kind of our recap of what is the difference between our revenue and expenses for that planned year. What did we begin our fund balance with, and what can we carry forward? Because all of these are in one of those buckets that can keep their money going forward. And we do strategically build that fund balance up in some of these plans to be able to pay in the out years. And so specifically in our textbook adoption plan, we've got for next year planned expenses, and I'll talk about the expenses first. We have a history adoption coming down the pike, and so that's anytime we have a big core adoption, it's going to be a significant cost. So that cost is looking to be just about $1.8 million. We've got recurring costs for our English program, an investment in our health, PE, and driver's ed, and then some operating costs in music, performing arts, and some miscellaneous items. So for next year, it looks like we are going to need about $2.5 million. We recommend an increase in this fund of $150,000 in this transfer from the current year transfer in order to get us to that point and start building in additional monies for future out years. Any questions on this?
Do we get anything from ELL? Do we get any type of extra for any type of training for ELL?
There are funds in the Calc 204 ELL.
Okay.
Well, are you talking about the English language?
Mhm.
Yeah, we actually have a special, or separate designated federal grant, Title III.
Yeah.
Is specifically for that purpose.
We still got.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
And we also get state funds for it too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
State funds.
Oh, yeah.
All right, not hearing questions, we'll move to the next one. So the next one is our fleet replacement plan, and this is a lot of information. You'll see in our fleet plan, the majority of this is going to be funded just from the general fund transfer. To kind of explain how we come up with this, Ms. King over in transportation gives us a list of all the buses that we have. The plan is for 15 years, and we would like to get back to where we're closer to having our oldest bus only be 15 years, but right now I think we have 70 buses that are older than 15 years. There were several years in which we had to pull or reduce the transfer into the fleet replacement plan, and so we have fallen sorely behind from where we would like to be in funding this plan. So we looked at it and tried to get as aggressive as we could. And you can see we break it apart between, in this first section, the regular ed buses and the special ed buses, because there is a cost differential, and we have that broken out. When we plan the fleet replacement plan for the out years, we do put a cost multiplier in there. We got information from one of our vendors as a kind of an estimate of what we would pay at the end of this year for a bus, and with everything is rising, and so even the cost of an individual bus is rising significantly. But we did build in a 2% increase for the out years outside of this year. And I'll be honest, it won't be until in the 2030s that we catch up and get us back on track with having all buses less than 15 years old. I would like to do that quicker, and I know Mr. Hardy and Ms. King would love to do that much quicker as well, but they're just not, we're not there yet. So then we also have some other vehicles some big maintenance trucks, some small SUVs, some mid-sized cars that are on the plan, that was built into the plan a couple of years ago. The ultimate goal is to get this plan to cover not only these, but also our pool cars as well. And I've talked to Mr. Cables and the folks over in transportation, and they all have the same desire, because we have some pool cars that are getting less than 500 miles a year, and they have low mileage on them, but we have others that are used more often and are costing extreme amounts of maintenance to keep up and going. So we do need to kind of take a more holistic look at all of our vehicles that are in service, because ultimately, we would like to streamline and ensure that all of our fleet is not costing us too much in maintenance costs, and we're turning it over much quicker.
One question on that. You know, we said that we were gonna buy more trucks so that we didn't have two in a truck going to a location when you only needed one. Did we get to that level where we had enough extra trucks that?
We've made progress on that. I don't know, we could probably use 2 or 3 more, but we have made progress with some vans and trucks that were purchased over the last year.
I know that was an issue of sending 2 people, we didn't need but one, so that person had to go, or go with that one because you only had one truck. Or one
I don't
vehicle.
think that's, there's only a few instances where that happens now because of the.
Okay.
So we haven't made progress.
All right, good. Thank you.
So at the end of the day, what I would recommend to the school board is to consider increasing the transfer into the fleet replacement fund by $600,000 for next year. That's a large number, but I think that's what's going to be necessary in order to get us caught back up. And that doesn't even occur until around 2030-ish again. So even putting large amounts in there, it's still, we're behind the 8 ball quite a bit.
So that's just been a budget balancing measure over the last couple of years, I mean, just not replace as many buses.
Is that assuming we have extra funding to do that, or is that a part of the transfer replacement you're already talking about?
So the 600,000 would be increasing the transfer that comes out of the general fund.
So that would be an additional spend for this year.
Mhm.
Right. Which I hope we have 600,000.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so once we know what the, proposed changes from the governor's budget is, once we see what the General Assembly does, we'll see what those revenues play out. And right now, these are just things that we ought to pay attention to in terms of how we might need to spend whatever does come in.
Yeah. And you'll give us one of those summary sheets where you're asking for these, or where we put the wants.
Yeah, we're not to the point of having a priority
No, I understand.
priority list yet.
Yep, okay.
Yeah.
And I think we've delayed that in the past of putting what we needed to into the replacement fund, so they're using it other places, and so I think that's.
Peter to pay for Paul.
Yeah, and then we get to the years on these vehicles, then they're breaking down more, we're spending more on maintenance, yeah.
We still got the propane buses if we and put those back in.
But, it's been, again, for the benefit of everybody listening, it's been a great budgeting practice over the last 10 years just to save up and plan for these things versus kind of, willy-nilly approach maybe of years past.
Get them as an emergency item. Yeah,
Right.
That's right.
Right.
So if there are not any more questions, I will move on. So our next plan is our technology replacement plan. We have more funding going into this plan, but still, even with having additional funds from the state and E-rate, our transfer in from the general fund is quite significant, but there are significant needs. And once upon a time, this was called the laptop program, and we use it for, insuring our laptops. But we've really kind of evolved this into, really the technology replacement covers everything from building security to distance learning equipment, to networking, servers, wireless, everything that we touch and we do is somehow linked in. You can't even get into a building without using electronics, right? So everything, our phones are electronic, everything is. And so this really is, we have to have a good backbone, we have to have a good structure in place. And so we do need to make sure we are keeping up with this, because in today's society, if you're not, there is so much out there right now with cybercrime and frauds going on. Mr. Terry and his group are doing a great job of getting ahead of that and making sure we have that structure to, if not preventing some of these phishing scams, being able to respond to them immediately and doing what we need to do to protect the school division. And so this is really a critical plan that we do need to fund on an annual basis, because every single employee, every single student, every single parent who comes into our sites will touch our technology in some fashion or form.
Well, you talk about breaches and things that have happened. I know that some of the school districts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Terry, but they've paid upwards of $2, $3, $4 million to get their information back, but they still got your information,
We still have
right?
it. That is true.
So, I mean, this could be very costly. for us.
Cybersecurity is a never-ending battle.
Yeah. So it's money well spent when it gets down to it. And it also includes our radio that megahertz we changed, and cameras and things.
That is true. That's part of the leasing.
Right.
So I say all that importance because I am recommending an increase of just over $850,000 to go into this plan to fund everything on that list that needs to be taken care of next year.
Couple numbers, if I may, Mr. Chairman, stick out here. The IP telephone, that increase from 87 to 463.5, that's a,
So the $87,000 is an annual license that we end up paying.
Right.
And then, Mr. Terry, the 463 is that implementing, which new program is that?
Replacing all the classroom and administrative funds in that year.
Yeah. And we do
That's
have
the
to
difference in
periodically
the
do that.
licensing and the additional cost.
And that's the benefit and the beauty of having this plan, is we can look out and see one of those one-time large increases that we're gonna need, so we can build up, not just to pay for next year, but also make sure we have operating funds going into this pot of money to cover those future large increases. Was there another question on one of these? All right. So this next plan, the nutrition equipment replacement plan, is a new one. It's in here not because we're going to ask for any funds from the general fund. So this is the one that you can breathe easy and say, oh yay, we're not going to have to add this to our priority list, right? But it's in here because we've been wanting to collate this for forever. When we build a school, the kitchen equipment is put in during construction, right? But then it only has a limited life where the building's going to last 40, 50 years, and in some cases longer, even though we don't want it to last too long. But the cafeteria equipment will end up getting to a point where the maintenance on it is a lot, or it's breaking down. The last thing we want is, and this does happen, show up, turn in the oven, and it doesn't come on. So we can't serve hot food, right? So we don't want to see that happen, and so we really, although the nutrition fund will take care of their own replacements, and they have in prior years set aside dollar amounts to do that, this will provide them with the roadmap in which to ensure going forward that they are replacing things on the correct life. Most of these items are a 15-year life, and a couple of them are little 10-year lives. But this is really just informational for your use. There's a lot of equipment out there in our kitchens. At the end of the day, the 2024 number for 145,000 will end up being just a line item for equipment replacements in the nutrition fund. And they will self-sustain that. Moving on into the capital maintenance plan, which we also commonly refer to as our CMP. I do have a big highlight up there because Mr. Kegels keeps asking for money. And so this is how I'm trying to give him some money. If we can build up the CMP in small increments, and my recommendation is build it up by 250,000 every year until we can get up to what is suggested to be possibly a good CMP number of 2 million. We're showing what projects we plan on using and spending that money on going forward. Hopefully, you know, when we do have a CMP project, what'll happen is we estimate what it's gonna be, we set the budget up, we do the project, and if there's any excess budget, it goes into a reserve CMP account that can then be used for those urgent, we didn't expect that, right? So hopefully, as we're moving forward, we will have the ability to help fund Mr. Kegels a little bit here.
So we're gonna increase that from $1 million to $2.5 million by 2029.
Yeah, in small increments.
So what we gotta know is that 250,000 is gonna come out of our budget, education budget, to go into funding. And not to say that we don't need it, I get it. But between that and the board not funding SROs and then wanting to do fleet replacement, so we're gonna have a lot of tough decisions to make.
But our enrollment's going.
Well, yeah, we're gonna add 1,000 kids this year.
We hope.
Well, that would be nice. Of course, then we got other issues.
Well, I guess you have to try to look in the future and see where you
Yeah.
can get to.
Well, I mean,
that's,
These are all necessary deals, yeah.
Well, and I will also add some things that were not necessarily the responsibility of the operations department, such as digital signs, that I think we have a policy that we're going to replace them, but we didn't have a funding stream for them. This 250,000 will help cover that going forward. It will help cover the playgrounds going forward.
Boy, that's a
we
good
don't
one, to
get-
try and get us to buy into that with the digital signs. That's a good one.
Well, I'm just,
Well,
Or the
and to our
stadium.
point, I mean, we've added these things to say, hey, we're gonna take care of these and it's our responsibility, but as Todd knows, as he's inherited this budget, where am I supposed to get that money? You know?
You need to do it with the same dollars.
If I may, Susan, I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, we didn't have an inflation.
Right.
Gosh, where have we heard that before?
multiplier. So the $1 million that was set up, how many ever years ago that started, just doesn't cover anywhere.
Honestly, it wasn't that many, it was about 5 years ago.
Yeah, so, well, you know, what's inflation in 5 years? We're paying, in some cases, twice for HVAC units that we were paying, 5 years ago. So,
We should have put you on them. Well, let's keep going.
Well,
I feel like it's
the infrastructure is
horrible.
obviously aging every day. We've got
Yep.
older buildings, and I'm sure that's requiring more maintenance with
Hey, but if we
50-plus year
modernize
old.
a couple of these and
buildings.
moving forward,
The problem is the $250,000 might not be enough with inflation, when you look at costs down the line, if the
it might
trend
not be.
continues.
It might not be.
I think that's what they're doing, is trying to build that in.
we are, we're
Yeah,
trying to, in
that's it.
baby steps.
Yep, good idea.
And that's the whole point of all of these plans, is just to build that transfer in, so that as we're taking money out of operations and putting it over to these long-term plans, we're doing it in such a way that it does not hurt employees or classrooms.
Or students.
Yeah. So then the next one is our capital improvement plan. I would like to bring your attention to the fact that we did change the costs of all the projects. The Burton cost is the one that Bowser gave us. Plus, I added the land in there since we are using part of the grant money for to cover the land, right? And so I wanted to get the full cost of Burton in here. Then when we moved down to the two elementary schools, they have increased, and I used the same process for them as I did all the rest of the schools, so they're all increased. And when I conferred with Mr. Kegels and Dr. Nicely, the current estimate that we have for building a new school is based off of a $400 square foot price point. Our original numbers from last year were off of like a $270 per square foot price point. So that's a significant change.
I think we should note, those numbers that we plugged those in because those are the only real numbers we have at this point. That's the number we're given from, RMMM, assuming new replacement of the two elementaries. And I think now we're thinking, really there are maybe some legitimate ways we could do it, complete renovation. Hopefully we can get those numbers down. But those are the only real numbers we have right now.
Well, that is great. That was one of the things I was going to ask at the end, is if we could get that updated to be able to compare it to where our current's at and where, Susan, if you wouldn't mind sending us that, the CIP just like this is great. This is ahead of.
Oh, the current CIP versus this one?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. That way we, have something to look at. But, so Condiff and Cove would be 2030 under this scenario. And Burton would be 2025. And we have the 93 million for Burton, 38,280 for Condiff, and 33,440 for Cove.
And that's full renovation versus,
Yeah, it's not new, which I'm not sure it wouldn't be about as cheap to do new, but the point is, in the scenario that I'll get to at the end of our conversation, we're not that far off. We got to have a little help, but we're not that far off if they'll play ball.
yep, get close.
I did go ahead and plug the 80 million for fiscal year '25 for the bond allocation from the joint work session at the Board of Supervisors, so that we could see how that would play out.
And one more point, the Condiff Cove, is that from the study we did, Ken? Or Dr. Nicely, is that?
The square footage estimate, Mr. Kegels, remind me, that's based on what RMM gave us, or that was based on our replacing what's currently there?
No, that was based on what our NM gave us.
Okay.
So these are real numbers, is what I'm saying. We're not just,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that people understand, we're not plucking these out of the air.
That's right.
We hired an engineering firm
Right.
to do that for us, but it's also worth noting that that wasn't the cost in 2030. That's the cost if we built them today.
Right, today.
That's right.
Good point, yep. Good
It's based on the
point.
$400 square foot.
Right.
Right, yep. Good point. Thank you.
Trying to think if there's anything else to point out on here. So what we'll end up doing with the capital improvement plan, I will bring it back. If you have any suggestions or changes or anything you want to see different on it, let me know, because this is one we do tend to bring at the following school board meeting for your approval, so that then we can send it over to the county so they can
This-
include it in their CIP.
The CIP, you mean? Okay.
Yeah, this is the only thing that's kind of pre-approved, if you will. So if y'all want any changes or anything different, let me
Yeah,
know.
what's the schedule on that again?
We always present it at this work session, and then it is approved by the school board at the next school board meeting.
So you're going to ask us to approve this at the next meeting?
After analyzing it, and if you want
Okay.
changes, I can bring changes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So it's important that we do our homework and get this,
Well, and you're gonna give us a current,
I will always send
Well,
that.
it ties
Okay.
into what we're talking about with the review.
right,
We need to make sure we're all on board with.
yeah.
with
all
the
on
years,
same
where
board.
we are, how
Yes.
far we out till we get to these projects.
Right.
And it wouldn't be bad to kind of see how it affect these numbers if you were asking for more.
Well,
in increments.
okay, so that's a good point, Brent. So, all right, you're gonna give us this, you're gonna give us current CIP, and if we projected 80, 30, and 30, is that what we're looking at? To see what CIP would look like if we did 80 for BCAT, 30 and 30 for Cove and Cundiff.
So are you, I want to make sure I understand
I mean,
this. Right
maybe-
now, I have built in the 2020 off 2020. Are you recommending going to a 30-30 off, 30-30 off?
No, he's saying, could we get a version of it, keep this version?
Yes,
But
yes.
can we get a version of this where you plug, instead of the 38, 280 for Cundiff, for example, what does that number look like if it's just, just $30 million for a round number? And the thought is, okay, can we, by looking at a, renovation model, and we don't know yet until we get more information from RMM, but, what does this look like if we can get that number down to 30 million, and similar for Glen Cove? And what he's saying is plug in 80 million, is that what you're saying, for BCAT instead of 93, just to see what it looks like?
Just, and if it's too, and if you want to send me this in Excel, I can do it. I mean, but if you
Oh,
don't,
I
if
can
you
do
don't
it
mind
for you,
doing
for
it.
sure.
It would be good to see some options.
Sure.
Before discussing this MOU that was presented and the numbers that they have. We need to really sit down and look at what would the effects be in adjusting some of these numbers.
And I will point out that if you look in 2025, it did not take all the 80 million for BCAT. We did push parts of that down to
To the other two.
the elementaries. Yes, sir.
Okay.
But yeah, so you're asking me to change these to lower amounts.
It might be a good idea for maybe you and I to sit down with Susan, just have a meeting with her
Okay.
and Ken and try to figure out
Just to, okay.
some options.
They just want to see what it would look like if that
That's
found
all
to be in
just,
the case.
yeah,
Okay,
just,
yeah.
I hate to get you to do what ifs, but that's what that would be, is a what if.
It's my job.
Just looking at it quickly, it looks like it would take 2 years off.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, if you, doing the math in our head. But honestly, with the proposal that's if we left it like this. But if we could increase that funding just a little bit with a couple of tweaks that, first off, with the library, pushing that back maybe a couple years, giving us that, again, I'll go over all this, but maybe I'm getting ahead, but then if we could get 11 of the unfunded CIP, that would really put us there. That's how close we are.
30, something.
That's how close we are. 23, I think, 22, 23, something, I've got it. I didn't bring that particular piece with me but it's kind of poignant that, you're saying we need to, I didn't realize we were going to present this at the next meeting, but, so.
Yeah, we definitely,
Need
we'll
to-
talk after the meeting and we'll
Yeah.
set something up where individuals can go so we can kind of work some options and then we can all bring it
Just
back
make
and
sure
talk about it.
everybody's on board.
Right.
Sure. The other thing I will point out, funding-wise, is I did take 2 million of what's sitting in our major capital reserves and put it into BCAT for '24. And so what is available to you in major capital reserves will come down to below $1 million.
But it has nothing to do with our purchase. You've already allocated
I did it after
after the
we
purchase.
set aside the turf funds.
But we talked about that
Okay.
because our reserves were considerably higher than they needed to be, is what I remember.
Well,
right?
and really the whole
Most
point
people
of,
keep 4 to 5 and we had 6, am I wrong on
well,
that?
the whole point of the major capital reserves is to fund the cash portion
Right,
of
yeah.
construction. And so normally that would just automatically go in.
Let's go, okay.
And keep in mind on the next slide, there is an impact to move into this 2020 plan, the capital fund plan, that the county presented as well. And I'll go over that at the next slide. So if you're ready for me to move on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this next slide is just kind of a summary of everything that we've talked about today. So this is what we would end up hoping to drop in our priority list. I gave it to you last because it's a lot of numbers to swallow. The textbook adoption plan of $150,000, the fleet replacement plan of $600,000, just under under $900,000 for the tech replacement plan, The increase for Mr. Cagle is of 250,000. And then the capital joint fund policy. So if you recall, last year, we went to the 17 plan. And that gets us, we have to give them an additional 300,000 on our transfer to the county every single year off the top. That's non-negotiable. When we go to the 2020, that 300,000 will be 525,000 every single solitary year that I'm still gonna be here.
Can I say it a different way?
Yes, sir.
This is just my own benefit because it's the only way I understand it. So when she says, that's an extra, $300,000 every year, it's, okay, next year we build in, it goes up by 300,000, keep that, then the next year it goes up another 300,000, right? So I just want to make sure I
We're
say it that
already
way.
funding a piece of it.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to say it that way, because so every year when we get new revenues in, to say, hey, can we do other things? These are the kind of things that come off the top.
So just to be clear, 300,000, 600,000, 10 years later, it's 3 million.
Well, that's the total transfer. The individual yearly impact is only 300. And when we go to the 2020 plan, it'll be 525 million.
Yeah, it's only a
Thousand.
year.
Total 500.
It's a year to fund.
But after 10 years, it's up, I mean, it's 300 additional
No, it
thousand
stays.
every year.
It'll go up by that incremental amount each year. The amount that we put into the budget that year won't go up, but the total transfer we give them will go up. So you are
Right.
correct. And Ms. Owens
But
had a
it's
very good
300 a
slide
year.
in her
Right.
presentation that
So
So
showed.
10 years down, 10 years from now, it'll be 3 million.
It'll be a 3
I
million.
just, I just say that out loud because in our world, when it comes to our budget, I mean, those are big, those are significant amounts of
huge
money that
impact.
we have to then balance with other things we want to do. So, I'm not saying we can't, shouldn't do it or can't do it, it's just a good thing to say out loud, It's just like our flood insurance for the BCAP property, that goes up, what is it currently, $300,000 a year?
175.
And it goes up 25% every year, like it's
That's
how it's built
crazy.
in.
And it's a joke,
Right.
that's gonna be a wonderful.
But
program.
ADM in 10 years will be $20,000.
Okay.
We're saving you that, Dave, by bringing BCAT to Peters Creek.
I'm trying to find that money for you. David.
Mike.
All right, so if we're done with that and bad news in that, the remaining timeline. So what's left this month at the next board meeting, and I forgot to put up there about the CIP, but yes, we would adopt the CIP on the 19th. Then in February, we have a work session to go over compensation and benefits. We will provide the results of the comp study. And then on the 16th, I think there was maybe a conflict.
Yeah, February 16th is the regular board meeting, which will keep, so what was scheduled is also do a work session after that. And that's a date, I know I'm gonna be out of town, I think you're gonna be out of town, so I was wondering if we could look at doing that work session maybe on a different date where we're all here. Something to think about.
You mean the school board meeting?
Yes, sir. But instead of doing
Work session.
in my view, we
We
maybe
need an extra.
we might could keep the regular school board meeting, but
Oh, you're-
at least peel off the work session maybe is what I was thinking. But either way, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna need an extra.
Right,
Usually in February, I feel like we need extra anyway, because.
right. Yeah, budget season, yeah.
Yeah, we usually do.
See,
And then March, we'll have the final presentation and adopt the budget on the 16th.
okay.
So that's all, folks.
And another year's done.
I know last year we ended up adopting the budget in June or July. Do you anticipate any delays this year? I know we don't have the change in governorship and things like that, but do you
Certainly
anticipate?
hope not. I certainly hope we can get back onto the normal schedule and move forward. I've not heard anything otherwise,
Good.
so I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed.
Did anybody have anything else?
Yes, I do. Real quick.
Can I thank Susan real
Yeah,
quick? And then
absolutely.
get
You go.
into
No,
your-
you go.
Susan, thank you for what you do. I know you probably wake up in the middle of the night with numbers going off in your head. I don't, honestly, I'm just really thankful for you and everything you do for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Just real quickly, I wanted to, first off, Jim Bradshaw's father passed, and I just wanted to say,
Yeah,
You know,
thank you. Actually, we had two unexpected losses like that this week. Well, 3, if I can, if you don't mind extending. If
No,
with
absolutely.
permission. So Kathy King, Mr. Hubbard's cohort there in the transportation department also lost her father this week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then Jim Bradshaw unexpectedly lost his father this week. And then we also lost one of our longtime principals, Al McLaren, who was longtime principal at Glenver High School. Before that, back in the day, Hidden Valley Junior High, back in the late 70s, also passed away. So
Well, I just want to remember those folks, obviously. It's never a good time, but right here at the holidays, even on top of that. So thoughts and prayers are with those folks. Just wanted to go over real quick. I don't want to lose sight of the SROs. And I learned just another little piece now. So high schools, middle schools are covered. One school we're paying for. And is that because we can't get, or the police office couldn't get somebody for that?
correct.
Well, it was originally approved for the construction project.
Yeah, that,
For Burt High School.
from the sheriff's position.
Right, but the plan originally was they would have an SRO at the middle school, and the deputy would just be an additional.
Right.
But we're
For-
paying for that.
Yes.
The reason the police officer was not assigned in that situation was because they couldn't have somebody.
Couldn't
That was
fill.
one place where they couldn't staff it, and so that's where they suggested, well, let's just use the deputy, but of course, that's at our expense, so.
We have 8 SROs
In the elementary school.
in the elementary schools right now, which we're sharing, and we're looking to get 8 more
Right.
to end up.
And out of the
Fully so.
education funds, those are being funded for those 8.
6,
Right.
because 2 are full-time that
That you're
Sheriff
paying for.
Orange had
Yeah.
provided out of his staffing.
Yeah,
No, that
they're-
you're, I got you. So
they're
we're paying
actually
for the 6.
paying for
6, and then we
Gotcha.
had 2.
So we still need to work on the other 8.
Yeah, and also to your
And
point, I mean,
funding.
we pay for the salaries for those other 6. Sheriff's office, Sheriff Orange also supplies equipment, and which is also a cost.
So there's
Cars
more
and
out of that
everything else.
budget as well. Okay. And so we need to continue, with not meeting quite as much. I just want to make sure, we don't forget that, and we'll talk more about that as we move forward. And then the summary, I'm not sure if all of you got this, but I just want to make sure I don't keep anything. Did you send a reply back to just me and Brent, or to
Well,
everybody?
I sent it to you because that's who you sent back.
Okay. No, that's fine.
yes.
I just wanted to share with them.
Yes.
So I've asked just to get a summary of facts, where how we started with BCAT and the 2 elementary schools and the whole thing, just, and I've added commentary, which I've asked to get taken out of the summary. But I want us to have a summary of facts, just facts, where we started and where we're at. And so I've asked Dr. Nicely to help a little bit with that, but I'd like for each of you to have input on that, just to have one document that shows the facts of where we're at. So I had asked him and had put this together, and it's chopped up. But once we do that, I just want to make sure if there's anything you want to add or take away, that it's a living.
Did you have years in there?
So,
So yours?
yeah, kind of, but not necessarily chronological. I think it was just, and again, when I did this initially, the first summary was just a really chopped up version of, and it was late at night, and I was trying to get in fact, Brent had asked me to give a summary of, where we were at, and just, just facts. So, we're just trying to clean that up, and I want each of you to add to that and just have that kind of as a working, breathing document. And then I was going to ask, so Susan took care of that, but on the CIP, just to do that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But
Well, she added years.
yeah, that was really
So,
good. Yeah, you were ahead of the curve on that.
All right.
So thank you. And that's it. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that I had asked about that.
Appreciate that. Anything else? All right, meeting adjourned.